Welcome to Banking on Experience, the one-stop shop for all your financial services tips and tricks, the future of business and the future of the customer. Here is your host from CRM Next.
So Alex, it's great to have you on the blog, and we both come from an interesting convergence of backgrounds, both of us having done work in insurance and then moving into financial services. Two different paths in financial services, for me on the technology enabling side, working with institutions, you on the institutions, bringing in innovation and strategy. And so I want to thank you for making the time and just wanted to ask a few questions for as we sort of look at things that are going on today and lobbies being closed and people relying more heavily on their call centers and trying to do work from home in many cases, or trying to use the branch telephonically for appointments. It strikes me that there's some lessons from the past, and you and I had talked earlier about some experiences at Rockland or others in how we track and manage the experience a customer or a member has in getting something done with us, whether it's a loan rate adjustment or some other change. And would you want to think back to there was a couple of experiences that you mentioned that would be great to talk about?
Yeah, so I think we never had really great tools to track those things. Even back in the day when I was a larger bank at Fleet Bank, and we had rolled out a CRM system. That point was Siebel, the gorilla of the time.
Right.
And so we had the tool. We didn't use it to track information except the sales information. So if a customer came to a branch with a question and it had to be relayed to someone, generally that was done through email or, God forbid, through a phone call. Right. So you call someone, you leave a voicemail. There's literally no way to track that. At least in an email, you have the conversation of the email. But even that, of course, gets lost in your inbox or outbox or whatever folder you set up. So the challenge has been and continues to be, how do you track those conversations that need to be relayed to someone else? And so, we always had the training where we would say, you are the owner of the request. It came to you, so you own it. And it is up to you to follow up, and it's up to you to keep tabs on that. And the way that we did it at the branch was the branch people would have a book, an actual spiral book, and people would write notes. And the best ones would be the ones that would keep tabs of their pages, and they would cross out anything that was done. Of course, all the knowledge and intelligence that came from that conversation that we addressed and now it's crossed out is gone. It's in that book. And some of the better relationship people at the branch would have stacks of books, and they may remember, oh yeah, I talked to John Smith. I think that was last year. Let me get the book from last year. But obviously that was haphazard, and there was that was not shared throughout the organization. So
yeah, and what's
totally
interesting you bring that is that Tom really came up with the idea of a ledger for customer interactions.
Right. Yeah.
Add transaction ledgers. And a lot of people, when they think of CRM, at banks and credit unions, think about, you only get out what you put in. And yet, there was another rotation on that discussion, which is, the customer has a need. And you can make a human accountable for it, but how do you know, they can't get everything done. So they're contacting somebody in lending, or they're contacting somebody in back office. And we always hear this issue of, we have trouble with front office to back office communication. A person in the call center, may have better capabilities than, a person at the branch to maybe self-resolve, some issues. But most of the time, or at least a good portion of the time, they have to, ask somebody else to do something. They don't have the authority.
Yeah.
and as you know, most of that is email. There's an email here, an email there,
right.
And maybe there's notes in the core, and in most cases, there's the there's not always notes in the core,
or space for notes in the core. I remember there was in one of our cores, the space was limited, kind of like 300 characters or so. Yeah, pretty much. So people would use that, and the smart ones would use abbreviations to get the whole thing in there. And of course, someone else would look at it and not make sense of it. Or, you would just it would be the last interaction that's on the core, right? Everything else would be deleted every time.
Well, and you think about the number of requests, and if you've got 3 branches, or if you've got 100 branches, you're going to get a certain number of requests per day as human-to-human interaction happens. Then there's requests at the call center, and most of those today, as you were talking about some of your past experience, they come in the front door. Somebody sends somebody an email, and there's these threads of email. There's nothing really keeping track of did it get handled. Worse, the customer calls in or the customer walks in, and there's no ability for the team member to know what's going on with that request. They don't have visibility of the fact that there was a request, or know that it was resolved or it wasn't resolved. So
someone's working on it.
Yeah, and what sometimes happens, I've heard numbers as high as 50%. You get a second request, and it gets dual worked because that first request went to an email group. One person in the department has it, don't know that another person has it. By the time the second person gets around to doing the research or going to make the change, the first person's done it, and you've had this double work. So we bleed, customer experience and team hours. You really look at this and think, thousands of requests a week for, a bank or credit union under 5 billion. And in the time we're in right now, that number is possibly many, many more.
Right.
And look at how much staff time is going into, the member waiting, whether it's on hold or right there. They're picking up a phone call, guessing which group might be handling it. The group asking around in that group that, what's the status of this? Doesn't exactly look very organized. And, that ledger that's been missing, isn't for the conversations. It's also these tasks that need to, get resolved. And, if it's a complaint, you actually have not just the potential for, customer dissatisfaction, but you actually have other legal ramifications if you're not processing that complaint and working it appropriately. So you were talking about an example in a past discussion where you had the email example was let's both, I think, agree that this is the vast majority. 90% of the organizations, 5 billion and below, are using sticky notes, notebooks, or email to track requests that have to go between front line and back office.
Yeah. So in this situation, for others, we received an email from a customer upset about something, and I do not remember what. And there was one single person whose part of the job was to respond to emails coming to, customer service at yourbank.com. And so this person needed to get information from loan operations, I believe. And so an email was sent to loan operations asking for the information. And a couple of days later, that same person sent an email saying, I know you received my message. I haven't heard back from you. So the person sent back an email saying, I'm still working on it. I haven't heard back from my loan operations. I will let you know in a day or so. So a day or so, the customer again sends an email saying, I still haven't heard anything. I'm very upset. I'm going to take all my banking elsewhere. And so that was like a Friday. And that person responded, as soon as I hear from loan operations, I'll get back to you. I'm really sorry, blah, blah, blah. Happened that the following week, it was that person's vacation. So that person's out for a week. In the meantime, the customer had response during that week several times with, an escalation of concern and being upset. But all those emails by rule within Outlook were going into a folder where the original person had placed them. The person covering for her was working on any emails that came in, but never saw those messages because those messages went into the folder. By the time the person came back from vacation, the customer was livid and did not want to talk to the person that responded and wanted to talk to the manager, etc. So the whole process that we had set up, which was a ridiculous process of this one person managing and knowing where everything is and using Outlook as the repository of the complaints or questions that came through email, showed that it was a totally inappropriate process.
Yes, and you really look at email syndication and having it auto create cases that have an SLA. Right. You had mentioned there was other issues with in a mobile application, a person could put in a request, and the different groups would have different sort of standard response times, not thinking about the fact that it came in digitally or and today I think we both have noted that Twitter becomes an escalation point.
Absolutely.
People will try email, people will try the 800 number or the phone call. But when things start to not get responsive, they air it out in the court of public opinion, and then you get a DM. So you look at what's happened since we've been involved in banking, and you've had the branch as a place of interaction, you've had the phone, you've had email, you now have social media, all of these, places creating, an awareness of a customer need, and then, the need to get it done and track it and move it forward. And doing that well, we talk about expectations from customers, and the question really is, people just want it to be resolved. They don't want to worry about, I believe, and they just need to get statusing, and there's been missing plumbing. And I think what you had said at that institution and others, there were pieces of a solution bolted together, whether it's to track complaints or track to some other things, as far as even using sort of a homegrown little database. But what you end up with is people thinking that this is an issue that's only there 5% of the time, when it's really an issue that's there 100% of the time. How long it takes to find out what's going on with a request that went between front office and back office is always there, and this potential of dupe work and others, really there in a lot of experiences. Right.
The interesting thing is, we never step back and look at it. So if it's 5% of the time, and let's say a totally ridiculous number of 100 calls a day, right? Nobody gets only 100 calls a day. But imagine if we only got 100 calls a day, that's 5 calls, right? Multiply that by the number of work days in the week, in the year. That's a ton of complaints, right?
Yeah.
And that's amazing. And
that's a very small number of calls per,
Right, exactly. I mean, you get thousands of calls.
A billion, and you start to look at the number of people they have, even if there are 100 people, at a credit union, the number of people that interact with a customer every day, whether it's on the phone or in person, that initiate a request. Right. And the fact that there's nothing that organizes or manages or reassigns, but makes you aware that you're missing your goals.
Yeah, and the way that we have addressed this in the past has been 2 ways. One is the technology. What technology we can bring. So it's okay, let's Let's start a spreadsheet that we can share in SharePoint and everyone keep an eye on it, right? Or let's build an Access database. Or let's go find a vendor that can help us figure this out. That's all those approaches can be band-aids, but they're not answering one of the major questions, which is, what is the experience from the customer? The other piece is that what people will say more often than the technology is, we just haven't trained people well enough. So we go to the call center people, we don't give them the right tools. There are, the vast majority of people that work at call centers and that are successful in call centers are the most empathetic people you can find within a financial services organization. And to go to them and say, you are doing a terrible job, we keep training you on this and you keep dropping the ball, is totally inappropriate. Because
well, and there's a bunch of reasons. I mean, first, right. The call center person, they tend to be smaller groups, and we try to make them universal bankers, right? They have to know 20 different systems, where the frontline person has to know 14 different systems. But, at some point, they don't have authority. We got to constrain authority, that when it has to go to loan ops or it's got to go to someone else for a second approval, you can't always one and done. Even if you had, great experienced people, you've got to have some controls in place if it's a bank or a credit union. I mean, that's right. The way the real world works. Right. So you have this issue that you've talked about, which is we keep talking about training people to do more when they're incredibly empathetic people.
Or doing better when we don't give them the tools to do it better.
And as you say that, I was just smiling because that email that gets sent most of the time is incomplete. Mm-hmm. So we haven't made it even easy for them to take that request and get it to the right team, right? Because they, with good training, mm-hmm. maybe they know all the questions to ask, but basic, relationship management that understands that for a given product, for a given type of request, you need this types of information so that the back office doesn't end up in a thing that is trying to call the customer and you don't have their mobile and, or emailing the customer and, here they made a request and, well, why didn't that person ask me about this? And,
I have the perfect example.
Okay.
And I have so many stories of things that are happening. So a customer calls the call center, and their question is, I want to pay off my mortgage. I need the payoff amount. So the agent says, great, I'll get back to you, and sends the request to the mortgage department. Let's say it takes a couple of days for that response to come back. The mortgage department either is going to come back and say, well, what is the date? Because we need the exact date to give you the exact payoff.
Right.
The call center person doesn't know, right? So that's one option. The other option is that the mortgage people will just pick a near future date and will say, if it's paid on whatever date, the payoff will be this much, right? So let's say that happens. So the agent calls back the customer and says, your payoff is X, Y, and Z.
Right.
In the meantime, they're gone to a branch. They've asked the same question. The branch person got all the information, had already talked to mortgage, and they have a different payoff amount. So now the customer is like, okay, do I pay $12,500 or do I pay $12,622? Which one is the correct number, right? And I tell you, I've heard this story several times. So it happens, thousands and thousands of times because, the original person didn't get all the information needed. The mortgage people, the SLA to get
There's
back.
There's nothing to manage the SLA, right?
Exactly. The person at the branch in this case knew enough to get all the information, or was on the phone with the mortgage people and were able to make that connection quicker. Whatever the situation is, this is a real life example of not understanding all the information. But I would not fault the call center person
No.
Because as you said, you need to know about every single product. So imagine.
And every single type of request against that product.
Right. So imagine if we had given them the appropriate tools where there is a, I don't know, some sort of customer relationship management tool that when you say, okay, or that has some sort of built-in knowledge base that would say, okay, payoff, and these are the 3 things that I need. And, never mind just capturing that information, but that system could actually say, enter it here, we'll give you the payoff, and now you have it without having to go back to the call center, back to a mortgage center. That would be one way. The other one would be just capturing the right information and going to the mortgage center, right? But we do not think of that because of 2 things. We spend tons of time thinking about the customer journeys when we're sitting in marketing. The marketing people are all thinking about the buying process and how do we build awareness of the product and how we sell the product and so on. The servicing piece is sort of like, okay, that goes away. We don't, we'll take care of that. Somebody else takes care of that. We're marketing. We're going to do the front end. The service people never really think about the customer experience from the customer standpoint, right? They don't go and do journeys and say, okay, this is how we do it, and this is how we would be servicing our customers, and this is how we empathize with them, etc. Funny enough, they're customers themselves, and when they are faced with the same problem, they throw their hands up in the air and say, oh, well, that's the way it works, because that's the way it works in my department. The second part is that we also don't do user experience, customer experience from the employee standpoint.
Absolutely.
So we never say, okay, we are the mortgage department. Let's do a customer journey for the call center rep. And, there's been times when I've talked about that with organizations. Most of these times have been organizations that I work with, and I say, well, we should be thinking of the internal customer, and they were saying, well, no, we're all about the external customer. We are customer focused. No, you're not, because if you don't solve the internal problems, the external customer is going to see them and experience them. So it is maddening that we talk about when you see banks, credit unions, insurance companies, wealth management companies, brokerage companies, all of them saying that they compete, or the vast majority of them say that they compete with service, and yet they are really not focused on service. They're focused on technology or reducing costs or increasing revenue, or a mix of all those things. I used to work for a bank that made no bones about it. They were not about service. They were about how cheap we can be, and everybody knew it, from the investors to the people that walked in the branch. Those banks don't exist anymore, by the way. Now every bank will tell you that they're a service, that they lead with service, and yet they don't think about the customer or member experience.
Well,
it is amazing.
And I think some of the problem has been on the technology side too, right?
Sure.
Where people end up with service management over here, or improving that process, but coming back to it from the frontline staff person's work design. Is it easy that the customer or member is going to call in about something? Is it easy for them to see what's going on with that customer, whether there's leads outstanding for that customer, or whether there's cases outstanding with that customer, or there's been marketing communication to that customer, or there's complaints? How do we get it so that it's not yet another group of screens? And I don't want to over tout our perspective on this, but when we look at 1 million bank team members globally having to work and serve 1 billion customers, so much of what you've said about customer experience comes from team member enablement. And it really is a crawl, walk, run. You don't need to boil the ocean. There's a few places that COVID and others have continued to highlight, right? That where it's hard to know what's going on. The organization feels like a black box. what is our turnaround? What's outstanding on certain loans? What's outstanding on certain types of service? What's been communicated to that customer? So we don't ask them about a product that they already have been asked for. When was the last time we sort of proactively reached out to the customer? Customer onboarding, a lot of people think of digital onboarding, it's like, oh, that's the application process. But no, it really is about an engagement process. And when have we reached out? Whether you go to a hotel chain, you get into your room and the phone rings. We just want to make sure your room's okay. What is the 222? How are we managing, as we've been talking about the customer's requests, and then the way that we get out in front of things. Everybody wants growth. The organization you said that said, hey, we're going to be the cheapest, they still wanted growth.
Right.
Everybody wants growth, and everybody really wants service. And digital, I think very frequently, and I think this is probably a great place for us to finish up for some actions for folks. Digital, everybody keeps thinking about it being self-service. Right. And, that misses the point. Right. Because it is an entry point, an access point for the customer or member, but it sets a set of expectations. If you even have within your mobile, the ability for them to make a request, it's got to get into a queue. It's got to get, and it's got to have a response time that is appropriate, and you don't have to bake these things separately, because the same thing is needed for the call center person. Right. That request has to carry data. It's got to follow, that same thing has to happen, inside branch. And every branch manager faces this every single day. But I think people have been saying it's just hard to do. And I think that, it doesn't have to be.
But I'm going to beat the dead horse and say, so we've said, okay, so we're going to set up digital to be the self-service channel. And, people have started to think, digital, we're going to have to build relationship management within digital, right? But instead of, again, thinking of the customer experience, and what does that mean? They're saying we're going to build the relationship management by bolting AI into digital, and that is the solution, right? So that, again, what the heck are you bolting onto digital? So I can I'll give you an example.
Yes, that was great.
There are a lot of really great chatbot companies out there, and they're doing some really great work.
And we've done some work there too. Yeah.
Right, but people are going to expect to have a conversational exchange with a chatbot, whether it's a voice chatbot or a text chatbot.
Right.
And while I've seen them improve greatly in the past few years, that you get to a point that how I type or how I talk is going to be misinterpreted by the engine, the AI engine, and it's going to give me something that doesn't make sense. And I'm going to try to do it a different way, because I realize I'm not talking to a person. Maybe I know I'm not talking to a person, and I'm going to get frustrated.
Yes.
And I need to get out and talk to a real person. But what I've seen is some organizations put that chatbot out there. They tested with super simple type of requests. It's like, tell me the balance. Of course, balance. That's easy. Yeah. The AI is going to pick the word balance. Is going to give you the balance. But if you start saying something entirely different, something that the algorithm's not set up for, or the AI engine or whatever it is, then you're actually wind up with a customer that would not have been upset. And now it's upset, and they're ready to get somebody's head in a stick, right?
Yeah.
And this is a problem. This is something that we see when people are not thinking through the whole solution.
You're so right, and I don't think you're whipping a horse at all. I mean, I think this is when you really look at this from the customer experience. They want convenience and they want care. Mm-hmm. And we've talked about this. You've got every customer will have different circumstances that make them want different things. So they're, somebody who may be digitally preferred, I love to book all my airline flights in the app. But when I need to make a change, it's very easy to talk to, the 1K desk and have a person sort of give you the options, especially while you're running across the airport, literally, getting onto a flight. And those are, we keep talking about, certain types of customers liking human interaction, certain customers, all customers value convenience and care. And there's different, as you say, different journeys, different, products, different needs, and they don't live in a vacuum. And you've got to really start to look at it from the customer's perspective, which everybody keeps talking about, but it's the ability to serve that and not have them get tired of a chatbot. We keep throwing technology at things when sometimes what we really need to do is really look at how do you organize, unify, and transform the experience, around your experience with your bank, and make things simpler, make them easy for you to get it the ways you need to, where it's, can be proactive, not just reactive. So I think there's more for us to talk about in another vlog, but I think the most actionable part about this is I think there's some very simple things that could be done that people can look at right now, whether it's case management and others, where they create a value basis that allows them to do the other things they need to do to start to unify, right? Things, get it organized, get it unified. And then you can start to look at where can we make it easier for the customer to just dispute the transaction and all the data's there and, get a credit, based on a little bit of rule set. Just like, getting instant decisioning on a loan or pre-approval of a loan. All of these ways to, I think you've said it, no one walks in to the bank wanting to get a car loan. They're trying to buy a car and they need the loan to do it. Right.
Exactly.
And, no one makes a request to the bank because they want to follow it up. Not one person. They just want to, forget it.
I don't know. There were, having managed a call center, we had our regulars, we had people who called every single day. They wanted to talk to somebody. So there are a few.
No, but, and those people, you want them and, you build a relationship with them and, there's ways to, get them to be a reference or help you bring on others. Although, you do definitely want to also give them that alert that, yes, that check was deposited. Yes, that check was deposited. So I think, Alex, great to have you on and really looking forward to our webinars to come and, the work that Extractable is doing, with, the financial services industry and really helping give teams the needs, the capabilities they need, the insight they need to make strategic choices, or put a strategic framework in place, that tactical choices are made within.
Great. Thanks.
Thank you.
It's great talking to you.
Thanks for listening to another episode of Banking on Experience. Remember to tune in each week and subscribe, where we aim to simplify work, drive growth, and deliver on experience.